Okay, here we are with the last lab of the semester. And so we're going to get into our week 12 folder and then the lab folder. And as always, we're also getting into our studio. And here we go. And my notebook is going to look different from yours because I've been playing around with code, with some of the different variables that students have been talking to me about. So in any case, excuse me, I'm going to go down to the bottom of my notebook, get onto a blank line, and then I'm going to go back to the instructions, take a look at what we're going to do today. We're going to be doing some work with scatter plots and regression, and we're also going to do a little bit with comparing confidence intervals just to make sure you're in really good shape for the final project. So we're copying everything here from line 1 down to line, 81. Make sure you don't copy anything extra. And then paste that down here. Before we start to run anything, I'm just going to do my usual check down in the console to make sure that I am out of swirl, and I am, and just ignoring the error messages. Oops. And so here we go to our first chunk, which is the library chunk. Let's chunk it away. As usual, nothing really happens at this point. You just want to make sure that your GSS data set is available over here in the environment window on the top right. Okay, so now I just wanted to do a quick review, like I said, so you're in good shape for part 1 of the final project, and doing confidence intervals and comparing groups. So in this example, my independent variable is sex, whether someone is male or female, and my dependent variable is not race. And for those of you unfamiliar with that variable, it's the question, we're faced with many problems in our society today, none of which are easy or inexpensive to fix. For the following problem, tell me if you think we're spending too little, about the right amount, or too much. And the area that they're being asked about is improving the conditions of blacks. So are we spending too little, about right, or too much on improving the conditions of blacks? So what would an appropriate research question be if we were looking at these two variables together? I always find it easy to start very simply with what is the relationship, and then just between sex and opinions on spending to improve the conditions of blacks. Then a null hypothesis. Remember, the null hypothesis is that there's no relationship between our variables, so the null hypothesis would be there is no relationship between sex and opinions on spending to improve the conditions of blacks. It doesn't matter if you are male or female, it doesn't affect your opinion. What about the research or alternative hypothesis, the one that we want to prove? Well, If our null hypothesis is that there's no relationship, then a research hypothesis would be that there is a relationship between sex and opinions on spending to improve the conditions of Blacks. And you can leave it as simple as that. If you have an opinion specifically that you think men or that female have one type of opinion as compared to the other sex, you could mention that here, but it's fine just to have a generic statement like the one that I've listed. Okay, so then we need to get our variables into the right shape. So sex is currently coded in RStudio as 1 and 2 for male and female. We need to make it into a 0, 1 dichotomous variable. And so what I'm doing in this chunk is creating a new dichotomous variable that's called female. It will be 1 or true when the person is female and 0 or false when the person is male. We're chunking it. And so down here you see the final outcome. You may remember from prior weeks that females make up the bigger share of our GSS sample. And so you see true for people who are female, they make up 55.9% of our sample. Now we have the variable nat race. And as I mentioned, it has 3 categories: too little, about right, and too much, which makes it an ordinal variable. To get confidence intervals around it, we need to dichotomize it. And so as you're working on your final projects and going through the code that I've created, make sure you read these little notes that I'm highlighting here. In this case, we're creating a dichotomized variable, and true or 1 is for people who feel we spend too little on improving the conditions of Blacks. And then the false or 0 are people who feel we spend about right or too much money helping Blacks. So I'm creating a new variable called nat race little. Okay, it's going to be dichotomous. Let's chunk it. And here we go. At the bottom, you see our final results. True, again, people who feel we are spending too little to improve the conditions of Blacks. It's about 34.6%. And then everyone else, people who feel we spend about right or too much money on improving the conditions of Blacks, is about 65%. The final thing we're going to do is compare the confidence intervals for males and females. And that's what this code here does. First, we're pulling up females and getting confidence intervals for the nat race little variable for them. And after that, we're going to pull out the males. So let's run this chunk. And so the first 2 confidence intervals that we get here are female responses, and the last 2 are male responses. And so if we were to interpret these, first I'm going to do the 95% ones. So we are 95% confident that the proportion of female Americans who think we are spending too little to improve the conditions of Blacks is between 0.36 and 0.37. Let's compare that with males. We are 95% confident that the proportion of male Americans who think we are spending too little to improve the conditions of Blacks is between 0.31 and 0.33. Right? We're comparing this group, the 95% confidence interval for females, with the 95% confidence intervals for males. And then we do the same thing, but for the 99, and just to save myself some typing, going to copy what I just wrote and change this to 99. And for females, it's going to be from 0.36 to 0.37, so it's about the same. And then for the 99% confidence intervals for males, it's 0.31 and 0.33. So the intervals are about the same when we round them, even though when you look at the full numbers, it's slightly wider for a 99 than it is for a 95. So for both sets of confidence intervals, 95% and 99%, the male and female groups do not overlap. Males have a lower proportion of people thinking that we spend too little on improving the conditions of blacks. So because the confidence intervals do not overlap, we can conclude that males and females are different and that there is a relationship between sex and opinions on spending to improve the conditions of blacks. Right? And then write a conclusion based on our confidence intervals. We can reject the null hypothesis and conclude that there is a relationship between sex and opinions on spending to improve the conditions of blacks. And if you want to again give more details about that women are more likely to say we're not spending enough or whatever, you can add that in here. But that is about it for what you need to do for part 1 in your final project. The only thing I didn't include here was when you're doing the 95 and 99% confidence intervals just for the dependent variable without looking at categories of the independent variable. But other than that, if you understand everything that we've done right here, you're in good shape. I'm going to wrap up this video and then move on to part 2 where we will be covering regression and scatter plots.